Chapter 7. Why am I sometimes more irritable than other times? Up to now, we've concentrated largely on the question, why do some people get angry more easily than other people? And we've come up with lots of answers, or at least we could work out lots of answers for lots of different situations if we wanted to by going through our model. Some of the answers might be as follows. John gets more angry than Ken because John finds himself in more anger-making situations than Ken does. Laura gets more angry than Mona because Laura tends to judge and appraise situations differently from the way Mona does. Norma gets more angry than Olive because her inhibitions aren't so well developed. Pete seems to get more angry than Quentin because Pete will countenance more hostile responses than Quentin does. For example, Pete will shout and threaten while Quentin tends to sulk. Rachel gets more angry than Sarah because Rachel believes that other people are basically a self-centered lot who can't be trusted, so she tends to misinterpret some situations, and so on. So we can now make some more informed and reliable judgments about why some people get more angry than others or seem to be more angry than others because of the way they respond when they are angry. And this is good because if we want to be one of those people who is angry less often, we can already see that there are going to be some very powerful things we can achieve. We have a nice model which we can apply systematically in your own particular case. See Fig 7.1, which is a model for analysing irritability and anger, and that is on page 49. And added to the boxes we've already got, we've got a mood box that is affecting the appraisal judgment, the anger, the inhibitions, and the response. And in the mood box it's got, just as when used colloquially, this refers to being in a good or bad mood. Like beliefs, your mood influences almost every aspect of your life. The major influences on your mood are state of health, circadian, rhythm, exercise, nutrition, consumption of certain drugs, quality of sleep, life stresses and social factors. Moods. But for many people, it is the variation in their irritability that really concerns them. In other words, some days they feel really irritable, other days they don't. If you are one of these people, then you will know that this variation causes major problems for people around you because they never know what mood you're going to be in. So they can never relax properly with you, and that in turn means that the feelings of intimacy and closeness that would otherwise develop between you and them simply don't have a chance to take root. Moreover, you will also know that this causes major problems for yourself, not just in how it impairs the intimacy of relationships, but also because you continually feel as though you have let yourself down. If you have these big variations in irritability, you will sometimes look back on things you did yesterday or even earlier on today and feel embarrassed or ashamed by them. For although they seemed perfectly sensible and justifiable at the time, now you can see that you were being excessively irritable, you were in a bad mood. Actually, they don't always seem that sensible at the time. Maybe you know when you're feeling irritable and that's a very bad feeling. The trouble is that it seems very difficult to snap out of it at the time, and indeed it is. The good news is that there are all sorts of things that we can do to keep ourselves in a stable mood. But first we need to focus on the key concept of mood. In terms of our model, like beliefs, it influences all four of the major boxes from appraisal stroke judgment downwards so that the model now looks like Fig 7.1 on page 49. How does this work? First of all, take the way mood influences the way we appraise and judge things. Try thinking of Tim, who does indeed have problems with his moods and who will see things quite differently depending on whether he's in a good mood or a bad mood. He drew up a table to show just how differently things could look to him, and that's table 7.1 on page 50, on good moods and bad moods. There are 3 columns. The first is the situation. The next column is how Tim sees things when he's in a good mood, and the third column is how Tim sees things when he is in a bad mood. The first situation is neighbours playing music next door. Then under the column how Tim sees things when he's in a good mood, he's got cheerful and symbolising the cheerfulness of life. Then in the next column, how Tim sees things when he's in a bad mood, he's got selfish and inconsiderate. The next situation is neighbours' children playing football in the street. Under the column how Tim sees things when he's in a good mood, he's got communal thing to do. Sometimes Tim would even join in. Then under the column when Tim's in a bad mood, he sees them as selfish and inconsiderate. Tim will watch for the ball going on his garden. The next situation is people coming into the pub when Tim is sitting near the door. If he's in a good mood, he sees it as the pub filling up nicely, regardless of whether they shut the door or leave it open. When Tim's in a bad mood, he sees it as faultless and a nuisance. The next situation is Tim's wife contradicts him in public. If Tim's in a good mood, he sees it as a chance for a good bit of banter. If Tim's in a bad mood, he sees it as totally out of order. The next situation is sees his wife flirting with other men. If Tim's in a good mood, he sees it as all good fun, there's nothing in it. If Tim's in a bad mood, he sees it as totally out of order. Yuma has exactly the same problem with her moods, and she constructed a similar table. This is table 7.2 on page 51. And in her table she's got of good moods and bad moods. Her situation first is her husband eating noisily. How Uma sees things when she's in a good mood, she's put doesn't notice, and under the next column, how Uma sees things when she's in a bad mood, she sees it as totally unbearable. The next situation is her children dropping and breaking things. If Uma's in a good mood, she sees it as accidents will happen, I've broken enough things myself in my time. If in a bad mood, she tells herself that it drives me completely mad, it's just pure carelessness. The next situation is waiting for 2 hours in an outpatient clinic with her child. If Uma's in a good mood, she sees it as likely to see it as a chance to get to know the other mums. If in a bad mood, storms straight into the clinic room and has it out with a doctor there and then. The next situation is her husband telling all and sundry what they've been talking about. If Uma's in a good mood, never takes a positive view of her husband talking about things she has regarded as between them, however, best just to leave it. But if Uma's in a bad mood, that's the last straw. I just feel like walking out on him at that very moment. And the last situation is children are disobedient. If Uma's in a good mood, it's no use getting het up about what your kids do, there's no change in them. But then if she's in a bad mood, she's a wonder why I ever had them. It's clear from these few examples that anybody who is in a remotely similar situation to either Tim or Yuma will be having a great deal of trouble making sense of their life. One day they're up, the next day they're down. One day they're laughing and joking with people, another day they're snapping their heads off. Worse than that, it can vary from one half hour to another. So what kind of things do we have to watch out for to keep our mood steady? Some of the main factors are illness. Mental illnesses such as depression or physical illnesses such as viral infections can both disrupt your mood. Routine. It is very important to maintain a fairly consistent routine in terms of times of eating and sleeping to maintain a steady circadian rhythm. Otherwise, you find yourself in a permanent state of jet lag, which is very disruptive. Exercise. Humans are built for activity, and during phases when we don't get this, we are liable to be that much more irritable. Diet. Some people eat lots of sugar-rich food, which sends their blood sugar levels sky high and then correspondingly low. Other people feed themselves so poorly that they are effectively suffering from malnutrition. Drugs. Routinely consumed drugs such as caffeine, alcohol and nicotine are vastly underestimated in their effect. Recreational drugs can also devastate one's mood. Sleep. Getting insufficient sleep on a regular basis is bad news indeed. Stress. Having too much to do, too many pressures on you, tasks you find difficult to achieve, and other life stresses take a severe toll on your moods. Social factors. Arguments with friends, relatives and workmates, bereavement, separation and divorce, simply feeling lonely. These are just some of the social factors that can affect our mood. If you know that you sometimes get irritable, the chances are that there are several items on that list which look familiar to you. The good news is that we can work on them, and later on in part 2 of this book, we will see exactly what to do. There are tremendous payoffs here. Most people much prefer someone who is the same every day to someone who is downright moody. Case study, Georgina. Georgina went through a period of 3 years in her late teens when she said she would snap anybody's head off who looked at me in the wrong way. It turns out this wasn't quite true. There were just some days when she acted this way. Other days she was a thoroughly agreeable young person with lots of friends, a nice family life and occasional boyfriends. It turned out that the reason she was sometimes so irritable is that she was prone to get quite depressed, mainly on account of her boyfriends being only occasional. When she did feel depressed, however, she was snappy in the extreme, and even people's attempts to cheer her up provoked an abrasive reaction. Unsurprisingly, some of her friends drifted away, while even the ones that remained tended to treat her with some caution. The solution to Georgina's problems was twofold. First, she gradually worked on her depression until she settled in a fairly consistently happy mood. This was difficult because she had set up a vicious circle whereby her depression caused her irritability, which caused some of her friends to desert her, which in turn exacerbated her depression. Nevertheless, she implemented 3 significant measures which helped her to be happier. Second, and while she was working on her depression, she also worked on the response box in our model. In other words, she trained herself to button my lip and count to 10, whenever she felt like snapping. The net result is that both she and her friends feel that life is now more predictable, and partly as a result more rewarding.